The moment the gunshot rang out in the marble-clad courtyard, time splintered into shards of terror and disbelief. Luna's trembling hand had raised the weapon not with malice towards Steffi, but in a desperate bid to frighten her into silence, yet the bullet's trajectory betrayed her panic, veering off course and ripping through the afternoon calm with incendiary force. Steffi, already startled by the intruder's presence, froze for a heartbeat too long, and in that heartbeat a crimson stain blossomed across the polished stone where Sheila had hurled herself between shooter and target. Sheila's body crumpled like paper beneath her, arms outstretched as though sheltering the daughter she barely knew she loved, her screams cut short by the impact of shrapnel lodging deep in her side. Steffi's scream shattered the stunned hush, a mother's wail fused with a daughter's cry, and Finn, arriving mere seconds later in a whirlwind of coattails and frantic orders, caught sight of Sheila's pallid face, her eyes half-lidded with pain, before the world blinked out in black and red. By the time the EMTs swept Sheila and Steffi onto separate gurneys, the courtyard had become a maelstrom of horror. Security guards shouting into radios, onlookers recoiling in shock, and Luna sobbing in the shadows as the gun clattered to the tile. Finn abandoned protocol, vaulting over wrought iron barriers to stay by his wife's side as she drifted in and out of consciousness. "Stay with me, baby, stay with me," he murmured, fingers pressing against the wound in her shoulder, while paramedics loaded him into an ambulance alongside a shivering Sheila, whose faint moan haunted every echo of the siren's roar. At the hospital, the emergency room morphed into a war zone of triage stations and blazing overhead lights. Steffi's gurney rolled first, her eyelids fluttering, her breath jagged. Beside her, Sheila lay motionless, machines beeping in metronomic warning. Finn stood at the crossroads of his life's two greatest loves, his white coat steroid thick with adrenaline and dread, as the head trauma surgeon beckoned him toward the oar. Without pause, Finn scrubbed in, his heart pounding so fiercely that his mask dampened with sweat. The two operating rooms opened before him like gaping maws. On the left, Steffi's room, where a shotgun blast of agony had fractured ribs and punctured lung. On the right, Sheila's, where the stray bullet had torn through muscle, lodged against her spine, threatening paralysis or death. There was no question of choosing. Both lives depended on his hands. He anchored himself at Steffi's side first, guiding his team through the delicate extraction of ceramic fragments from her chest, patching the lungs' torn tissue, wiring shattered bone, and sealing arteries that pulsed like frantic lovers reunited. Each stitch was a promise, each clamp a vow, and late into the night the steady hum of ventilators and the hiss of cauterizing tools serenaded his fury at fate. Only when Steffi's vitals stabilized did he slip across the sterile corridor, leaving behind the faint smell of iodine and triumph, and enter Sheila's theater. There, the challenge sharpened. The bullet's shrapnel had nicked vertebral arteries, and the slightest tremor in Finn's hand could sever the delicate network that carried cognition and movement. He leaned into the task, bone by bone, nerve by nerve, the drip of his own blood pinched to numbness beneath the cuff of his scrubs, his vow to protect this unlikely savior an iron rod through his very soul. Hours bled into dawn as Finn closed Sheila's final incision, layered muscle over broken skin, and whispered a benediction before sealing her into a coma of carefully calibrated sedation. Medicine's ghostly lullaby meant to cradle her body until it healed. By sunrise, both women lay in adjacent ICU beds, draped in white sheets, their chests rising and falling in unison to the rhythm of machines. Finn slumped into a chair between them, exhausted limbs trembling, and allowed himself a single moment of vulnerability, tears he had no time to shed pooling in the corners of his eyes. The hospital corridor outside crackled with whispers that split the world of Los Angeles into two camps. Some hailed Sheila as a fallen angel, a redeemed soul whose final act transcended her dark past. Social media exploded with #SheilaHero, posts praising the woman who had leapt into danger to save a life that wasn't her own. Others recoiled, their fingers pounding out hashtags like #SheilaEvil, pointing to her history of manipulation and madness and declaring her unworthy of sympathy. A devil who had merely served her own self-interest by creating chaos she could later exploit. Talk shows seized on the controversy. Legal analysts debated whether Sheila's action constituted justified homicide or criminal recklessness. Psychologists opined on the neuroses that might drive someone to sudden altruism. And conservative pundits warned of a society that excuses violence in the name of love. Meanwhile, tabloids plastered Sheila's photo across front pages, one hand curled over her mouth in surprise, the other draped across Steffi's back, casting her simultaneously as the savior and the sinner. Finn, caught between his vow to heal and the world's clamoring verdict, found no refuge in the sterile confines of the ICU. He moved from Sheila's bedside to Steffi's, cradling each hand in turn, whispering prayers against a tide of guilt. He owed his wife recovery, his mother research, and his conscience demanded reckoning. The hospital chaplain delivered last rites at Sheila's door, his voice low with hope, while a cardiologist adjusted Steffi's ventilator settings, his brow lined with concern. Finn's colleagues peeked in with gentle questions. Will she make it? Can she forgive herself? But Finn could only repeat the mantra that had sustained him through the endless surgeries. I did what I had to do. Outside, the city roared with split loyalties. Some citizens left roses on the hospital steps, candles flickering against the dawn. Others scrawled graffiti on walls deriding Sheila as unredeemable. The Logan and Forrester clans circled like wary wolves, offering public statements of support but trading private glances that betrayed their doubts. Taylor, heart heavy with remorse, sat vigil beside her daughter's bed, her trembling voice recounting memories of Sheila's redemption arcs and broken promises. Steffi's father, Ridge, stood a few feet away, his arms folded in stoic frustration, unwilling to condemn or condone until he saw Sheila's eyes open again. As night reclined over Los Angeles once more, the controversy had yet to reach a verdict. A televised town hall steered by Finn's fellow surgeons debated medical ethics. Was it folly to operate on two beloved patients at once, or heroism to risk everything for the chance at saving them both? Public opinion polls showed a nation cleaved down the middle, and Finn, ensnared in the epicenter, felt the weight of every gaze upon him. He knew the true test lay not in the court of public approval, but in the slow rhythms of recovery. The day Steffi drew her first full breath unassisted, or the moment Sheila's eyelids fluttered against sedation. In the hush between beeps and sighs, Finn resolved to stand by both women. His wife, whose life he had pledged to defend with every breath, and his mother, whose heart still harbored shadowed chambers even as it beat for the daughter she had once sought to harm. In that resolution burned the question that would reverberate long after the headlines cooled. Can one act of selfless sacrifice erase a tangled history of deceit? Only time, and the fragile grace of healing flesh, would tell whether Sheila's bullet-stopping leap would redeem her in the eyes of the world, or whether the scars it left on bodies, on hearts, on reputations, would forever mark her as a devil in angel's clothing. In the clammy morning air, Finn rose from his vigil chair, bracing himself for the rounds ahead, each footstep echoing a prayer that in this darkest chapter, love and loyalty might yet carve a path to absolution. When whispers of Steffi's accident reached the marble halls of Forrester Creations, the company seemed to shudder on its foundations. Designers clutched their sketches as though talismans, editors watched the elevator doors like watching for a storm, and every seamstress paused mid-stitch, breath-hitching at the memory of their beloved creative director's last triumphant collection now sidelined by injury. In the wake of scandal, Rumors of betrayal, of under-the-table deals and ill-timed partnerships that had splashed across every industry tabloid, Forrester's reputation teetered. It was into this fracture, this gaping wound of uncertainty and wounded pride, that Electra stepped like a viper seizing opportunity. The youngest Forrester scion, long dismissed as a socialite dilettante more adept at red carpet selfies than haute couture masterpieces, now revealed a cold-blooded ambition no one had suspected. Within hours of hearing that Steffi was convalescing in a Malibu recovery villa, Electra dispatched a sleek black SUV to retrieve Will Spencer, a creative talent who had long felt shackled by the weight of Steffi's exacting standards and the suffocating legacy of his mother, Brooke. Will, restless and determined to forge his own identity, climbed into the car not knowing his next move would reshape the industry. Electra, her gaze bright with scheming excitement, outlined her plan as the city skyline slipped behind them on the highway to the airport. She would launch a new label, partner by blood with Will's raw talent, and seize whatever runway slot they could commandeer. Forrester's calendar was locked months in advance. Paris Fashion Week listings had been finalized since last autumn. But Electra bribed, cajoled, and ultimately outmaneuvered an upstart Belgian designer to snatch a last-minute cancellation on the official roster. With the stroke of a pen, she secured the Pavillon Vendôme's coveted spring evening showing, promising the organizers a spectacle to rival any storied maison. Behind her calm facade, her mind whirred. She knew that Steffi's forced absence had left Forrester with a ghostly void at the critical moment when the world's press would descend on Paris, hungry for fresh voices and new stars. She intended to be that voice and that star, brandishing Will's designs like a siren's call to an industry desperate for reinvention. In the days that followed, Electra transformed Forrester's neglected atelier into a war room. She and Will commandeered a cadre of pattern cutters, seamstresses, and makeup artists, working around the clock under banks of floodlights. Sketches littered every surface, sharp shoulders, slashed fabrics, architectural silhouettes that seemed to hover between futurism and decadent decay. Will, under Electra's relentless encouragement, found himself shedding the timid flourishes of his past lines, embracing bold asymmetry and kinetic textures that glinted on the runway like shards of broken mirrors. She insisted on a theme, rebirth from the ashes, a direct challenge to the narrative that Forrester was a dying dynasty. As word of the guerrilla collection spread through the grapevine, industry insiders brushed aside the usual NDA warnings and leaked early prototypes on clandestine blogs. Fashion editors clamored for invitations. Bloggers snapped backstage selfies through cracked windows. Even critics who had derided Electra's earlier attempts at styling for celebrity clients felt the tremor of curiosity. Had the once pampered scion become a visionary provocateur? Meanwhile, back in Los Angeles, agents at Forrester Creations found themselves scrambling to patch the gaping hole in their Paris strategy. They had no choice but to acknowledge Electra's coup, even as the PR department scrambled to emphasize continuity, stitching together talking points about supporting internal talent and honoring Steffi's design legacy. On the eve of the show, the Pavillon Vendôme glittered beneath a crescent moon, its ornate facade draped in billowing white linen awnings. Electric anticipation crackled through the gilded foyer, where champagne flowed and models drifted like mysterious pilgrims through clusters of editors and buyers. Electra stood watching from the wings, her silhouette framed by the glow of stage lights, Will at her side, nerves steeled yet eyes alight with triumph. Behind the scenes, stylists coated models' hair with shimmering metallic sprays, makeup artists painted lips in shocking strokes of crimson and tribal patterns across cheekbones. The music, a hypnotic thrum of industrial beats, pulsed through the curtains. When the first model sliced through the darkness in a sculptural coat of onyx and silver, its lapels towering like guardian wings, gasps rippled through the audience. Each subsequent look ascended in audacious fervor. A dress woven with thousands of hand-embroidered sequins that caught the light like a constellation erupting in real time. A jumpsuit crafted from translucent vinyl and lined with feathers so iridescent they seemed to breathe. A gown whose train billowed with hidden air vents, creating the illusion of a living, undulating organism. Critics scribbled feverishly, their pen superlatives tumbling into collective marvel. Influencers snapped video loops to share on social media, hashtags spreading like wildfire, hashtag ElectraXWill, hashtag rebirth from the ashes, hashtag runway revolt. By the time the finale descended, the crescendo of smoke canisters and flickering strobes, Will and Electra striding out hand in hand as confetti rained like metallic petals, Paris Fashion Week had a new reckoning. The front row, once stocked with Forrester loyalists, now bubbled with unbridled excitement, with editors leaning forward to applaud the boldest collection they had witnessed in years. Orders flooded in. Carla Soares of Milan placed a pre-order for 20 pieces. The Harrods buying team requested an exclusive capsule line for autumn. Vogue's fashion director secured an 8-page spread. Even distant exhibitors at the official shows heard enough to brandish their cell phones, live streaming impromptu roundups that dubbed Electra the dark horse of Paris and heralded a seismic shift in luxury apparel. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, the fallout was instantaneous and unforgiving. Word of Electra's triumph splashed across corporate emails, supplanting the polished press releases about Steffi's recovery with raw envy and alarm. At the Forrester board meeting called at dawn, executives assembled around a gleaming glass table, their faces masks of disbelief. The marketing director cleared her throat. They've blown out our projections for Paris by orders of magnitude. Stock price rumors are already reflecting the buzz. A murmur rose. Once the jewel of Los Angeles fashion, Forrester Creations now looked like a house divided, its flagship brand eclipsed by the brash upstart within. Investors, who had rallied behind Electra's public positioning as the face of family unity, now feared her as a usurper. Some whispered that Steffi's return would rein her in, that once the golden heir regained her health, Electra's wings would be clipped. Yet others, less charitable, pointed out that Electra had delivered a spectacle that no one else could replicate, that Forrester risked becoming the somnolent titan in a world chasing her lightning-fast flair. Steffi, still convalescing, awakened to news of Electra's Paris conquest through a flood of video clips on her phone, runway panoramas, industry praise, Electra's triumphant smile in every thumbnail. Pain flared as she slid to a sitting position, her ribs protesting. Shock rippled through her injured frame. She scrolled through articles headlined Electra's coup, Forrester's new dawn, the scion who stole the show. A cold knot of bitterness tightened in her chest. Her designers, who once sat dutifully in her creative council, now sent her messages laced with awkward congratulations. Hope you're proud. Can't wait for you to see the press. Electra really stepped up. Steffi's phone buzzed ceaselessly with calls from loyal allies urging caution, reminding her of contract stipulations that shielded her title of creative director, but her mind swirled with confrontation. When she finally regained enough strength to speak with Rich, his voice crackled with equal measures of pride and concern. He urged patience, whispering promises that second-act alliances could be forged, that Forrester's heritage would survive the disruption. But Steffi tasted the metallic tang of fear on her tongue. Fear that Electra's wild gamble would become the new normal, that the House of Forrester would bend to her rebellious vision rather than to the legacy Steffi had painstakingly upheld. As dusk settled over Los Angeles, Forrester Creations braced for an internal showdown. The atelier's custom of summer soirees at the Pacific Palisades gave way to closed-door strategy sessions. Whispers of runway civil war began to circulate among junior staff. Electra's camp, comprised of young designers and marketing mavericks enthralled by her audacity, called for an all-out embrace of disruptive aesthetics, a lean toward Gen Z influencers and digital-first presentations. Steffi's supporters rallied behind refined craftsmanship, classic silhouettes, and the storied archives of the brand. Board members split into factions over fate and finance. Should Forrester invest in Electra's insurgent label or double down on Steffi's established global network? Each side brandished metrics, social engagement figures versus wholesale order volumes, Instagram impressions versus brick-and-mortar foot traffic, avant-garde press mentions against sales revenue, to argue for the company's future direction. In the eye of this gathering storm, Electra remained unfazed, perpetually in motion. Filming behind-the-scenes footage for her upcoming docuseries, sealing deals with Parisian boutiques, and dispatching prototypes to influencers in Shanghai, Tokyo, and New York. Will, standing by her side, watched as the brand he had nurtured blossomed overnight into an iconoclastic phenomenon. Yet, even he felt the prickling tension beneath the applause. The quiet tremor that signaled Forrester's most delicate legacy was now a prize in a battle for supremacy. Steffi's imminent return. Rumored for next month when her ribs would heal enough for long days in the studio, loomed like a gauntlet thrown down across Electra's path. The press, sensing inevitability, began teasing a face-off. Sisters at war, heir versus rebel, couture confrontation. For the world beyond, it was the dawn of a new era in fashion drama. A family divided, a runway transformed into a battlefield, and the promise that every show would now carry the charged undercurrents of personal rivalry as fierce as any couture creation. As Electra prepared to unveil her next capsule, an homage to the desert's jagged beauty, shot on location in Morocco and live-streamed to millions, she knew the stakes had never been higher. Steffi, emerging soon from convalescence, would find a brand both familiar and utterly changed, where legacy clashed with insurgency and where every stitch carried the weight of ambition. In the world of the bold and the beautiful, the greatest spectacle of all was never just the clothes on the runway, but the passions, betrayals, and alliances sewn into every seam. And now, as Electra's star blazed brightest, the Forrester family stood on the precipice of its most dramatic transformation yet. A runway civil war that promised to redefine fashion's horizon for generations to come.